Hey guys, Josh here from LiberSeed. I'm going to talk to you about Bitcoin and LiberSeed and how they kind of don't really fit together. I used to be a Bitcoin maximalist. Back in 2021, I was invested in Bitcoin, but I was also really trying to learn more about it. I was kind of invested in it in a way that very small amounts, but it was the hype of the scene of investments and what do you buy next, and so it got to the point where I was learning and listening to things like the What Is Money show, the podcast with Robert Breedlove. Michael Saylor was absolutely consumed all of my spare time. I loved the Bitcoin Standard and books similar to that. But I kind of realized over time that Bitcoin doesn't solve the problems that I think the human being needs solving. And so I'm going to go through why Bitcoin doesn't fix the real problems. So Bitcoin is often heralded as a revolutionary solution to the corruption of fiat money, inflation, centralized banking, and economic manipulation. And in many ways, it is. But from the LiberSeed perspective, Bitcoin still misses the roots of the issue. Because Bitcoin still plays the same game, the game of scale, the game of money. And so here's why Bitcoin doesn't solve the deeper human problems that LiberSeed is built to address. Bitcoin still relies on a monetary system. Bitcoin fixes the money, but it doesn't fix the reliance on money. LiberSeed's vision is not to replace fiat with a harder currency, it's to replace the need for currency altogether. In a small land-based community where your value is your contribution in food, skill, labor, trust, there's no need to exchange labor for tokens, no need to hold or hoard or hedge against currency risk. So self-sufficiency isn't built on better coins, it's built on less dependence. Bitcoin solves economic corruption, but not cultural collapse. And so Bitcoin might solve for sound money, but it doesn't solve for things like broken communities, mass loneliness, the death of real food, the outsourcing of our survival to machines and mega systems. Bitcoin won't grow your vegetables. Bitcoin won't fix your soil. Bitcoin won't teach your children how to build or love or heal. And so LiberSeed's focus is on rebuilding the roots of society and not just its currency. I often thought to myself, what would life be like years into the future if everybody kind of adopted Bitcoin? Well, the new adoption of a currency where the basis of it is who's already previously purchased it, it kind of gets to a point where all the rich people are buying this new currency, this new store of value, and it's almost like it's a parallel. Whoever had the money in the first place with the fiat currency, especially if you're able to, like what Michael Saylor does with MicroStrategies, you're able to sell stock, essentially print your own form of money to be able to buy Bitcoin, which is real money. And so all the poor people who are currently poor are not able to buy Bitcoin. And in the future, when everybody starts buying Bitcoin and the value of Bitcoin goes up, the rich are just going to get richer, more and more richer. And so I don't see that solution. And so I don't see that solving kind of some problems. I see how, obviously, once you get onto the Bitcoin standard, then lots of different problems are going to be solved. But these are all problems of scale. And so Bitcoin still requires infrastructure that you don't own. So to use Bitcoin, you need a phone, you need a computer, you need internet access, a functional grid, external verification via miners or networks. But in a truly self-sustaining system, your survival doesn't rely on invisible wires or foreign data sensors or corporate devices. If the grid goes down or the system collapses, the community of LiberSeed it continues. There is no change. The community still has water, still has food, still has shelter, relationships, knowledge. And Bitcoin holders have keys to a vault in a system that may no longer work. Obviously that's an apocalyptic scenario, almost, but there's still value to be held in that. Bitcoin encourages saving and not sharing. Bitcoin encourages holding. LiberSeed encourages giving. And so Bitcoin's ideology, you win by accumulating and holding an asset over time. a scarcity model that still echoes capitalist self-preservation. But LiberSeed is not about stacking sats. It's about building systems. You plant a seed, not because it appreciates, but because it feeds you. You share knowledge, not because it profits you, but because it strengthens others in the community. You care for animals, not because it builds your portfolio, but because it builds a life. And Bitcoin teaches you to defend your value. And LiberSeed teaches you to become valuable to others. Furthermore, Bitcoin cannot replace human scale. At its core, Bitcoin is still a tool of mass civilization, a tool made for scaling trust across millions of people who don't know each other. That's the decentralized system, but LiberSeed says maybe the problem is that we've scaled too far. We don't need better trustless systems, or we don't need better relationships. Or we do need better relationships, and that's where LiberSeed comes along. And in a 150 to 200 person village, you don't need a blockchain, you need a handshake. In a tight-knit circle, you don't need code to ensure honesty, you just need integrity. And in a land-based life, you don't need an online wallet, you need a spade and a seed. So kind of in summary, the real fix isn't digital, it's more localized. Bitcoin is a technology solution to financial problems, and that will extend through all different parts of the economy and individual lives. But LiberSeed is a human solution to a civilizational crisis. The problem, inflation. Bitcoin's fix is harder money. LiberSeed's fix is get rid of money altogether. Another problem is corruption. Bitcoin's fix is decentralized ledgers. LiberSeed's fix is no centralization at all. So another problem, lack of trust. Trustless protocols is Bitcoin's fix. But LiberSeed's fix is deep personal relationships. Another problem, disconnection from value. Bitcoin's fix is digital scarcity. LiberSeed's fix is tangible contribution. Another problem is survival dependency. Bitcoin's fix is asset diversification. LiberSeed's fix is skills and food and sovereignty. And so Bitcoin is a tool, but LiberSeed is a transformation. And so I think over time, this kind of goes into the idea that you're going to invest in Bitcoin because it's a better product. But LiberSeed, I advocate that it's better that you go and you plant a tree, and that tree is going to produce food for you over and over and over again. And then when you've got that food, you also are able to share it with others. Partly because it's kind of the opposite of Bitcoin. Bitcoin's going to stay like it forever. Nobody can touch it, nobody can destroy it. And it's not perishable, which is fantastic in a sense of a self-preservation over time. When you talk about, okay, how am I going to conserve energy for 1,000 years? Most people would say, okay, Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the solution for that. However, humans are built on social trust, and so having a personality that's intertwined within a community where trust is built, that trust is the preservation over time. And so when a community then comes together, you can grow some food, and the other ones can grow some food, and you can fetch some water, and other people can fetch some water. But ultimately, together, you're going to be more stable over time. And so, even mathematically, Bitcoin will eventually it's gonna decay over time. It still has half-lives, but trust is something that you're constantly working on, and it's an individual, almost decentralized, I guess. Just ancient concept, but people seem to forget about that. And so I'm not a massive believer anymore in Bitcoin. I still think it solves the problems. I still agree with so many things that Michael Saylor, Robert Breedlove in the What is Money podcast, I still agree with what they're saying. I still think that fiat currency is terrible. I agree with a digital kind of gold, a store of value. I think that's fantastic, and it solves problems within the scale of civilization. But I think ultimately that civilization is the problem. And so when we talk about things like, are you going to be paying taxes, or how do you get rid of inflation? Well, you can just stop earning money. And so within the capitalist and, or even the socialist and communism, everybody still works for money. And so when you work for money, you're able to be taxed, you're able to be controlled, because you're using a system where the governments control it. We're using a system where you need to still participate within the larger civilization. But you're kind of a part of it, but you're kind of not a part of it. And everybody feels like you're paying taxes for things that you didn't vote on. And so Bitcoin, even if it was to be adopted, you still have to pay taxes. You still have to vote on things that your taxes are going towards. Your Bitcoin that you're paying is going towards things that you didn't vote for. And so I think ultimately LiberSeed is more of a solution than Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is a patch over problems that have been created through kind of how money has been able to build it. So if you think about civilization altogether, kind of you had small little communities, and then they started to trade with it between each other. And so those traders then had to have a ledger, and so they would keep tally of who's got what goods or services, who's been given what goods or services, and you're able to then transfer payments between those